Many times in my life, I've noticed that I have similar attributes tied with the way that I'm feeling. As far as weight gain, lack of energy, these tend to be associated more with depression, or not so much even depression, just sadder times in my life. So I set out to discover the ties between emotion and the way that your body actually functions, or a human's body actually functions. When I started this, I got my main inspiration from a movie called What the Bleep Do We Know? They really focus in one part of the movie on neuropeptides. Now, neuropeptides are chemicals that are excreted from your hypothalamus, which is this little ball in the middle of your brain. It kind of is also tied to puberty. A lot of times during puberty, the hypothalamus is really kicking out certain neuropeptides. Well, come to find out, there's more than just neuropeptides tied to these emotional and physical changes. So I found that there's this group of chemicals called ligands, which are composed of hormones, peptides, and neuropeptides. Now, when you have a thought, any thought, there's an emotion tied to that thought, including the need to be logical, the need to see the world as physical, or the need to coddle your emotions. So there's only one real need in the human body, and that's to fulfill an emotional need. There's not three different ways of looking at things, there's only one way of looking at things. Now, with that said, there's several ways of looking at that one thing. So from a physical point of view, what happens is once one of these ligands is produced from the mind, what it does is it comes down into your system, and every single cell in the human body has a receptor for one of these ligands. They're called peptide receptors. They're called peptide receptors because even hormones, which are usually not peptide based, have a peptide transmitter. So everything has this. Every cell has this hole in it. And if you think of the peptide like a key that fits into this hole, everything is conditioned from there. In fact, you can't even do a drug, take an aspirin. Everything has a receptor for it in the cell. Now, these receptors are important for a very big reason, and that's because when you have a feeling, say depression, when you're depressed, there's a certain chemicals at work that go and they're pushed out all through the body. Now they find their way to each one of your cells, and they sit on top of this cell in a little hole. Now previously it was thought that they fit into the hole like a key. They go in and make the cell have all these unique changes. What they're finding out now is it actually goes in on top of the cell, sits into that cell receptor, and vibrates. It actually gives off a wave. Now that wave goes into the cell, which causes reactions in the cell. So, like cortisol, for example, they've tied to stress. People with not enough cortisol tend to put on weight. There's lots of different physical components to these receptors because they affect every cell. So your emotions, no matter how you're feeling, if you're feeling good, then each one of these cells gets a little pick-me-up. You know, you ever have that moment when you're feeling really happy about things, and some chronic pain that you're always concerned about seems to disappear? It's this receptor, namely the opiate receptor. Now what this means to me is that for a person's physical state, we have to always remember that it's tied to some sort of emotion, some sort of blocking. These emotional states, as a psychologist will tell you, are tied to childhood experiences, and some of it is just tied to demeanor by way of your genes. So one of the most important things that I've come to realize is the more that you put this specific chemical into the cell, the more it sends an electronic impulse back to the neurotransmitter, which is one of the main mechanisms that helps to send off these chemicals, and it strengthens that tie. It makes that tie much stronger. So every time that you happen into a situation and you think, oh, this is just the worst situation ever, the more that you have an electronic impulse to believe that this is the worst situation ever, and the more you happen to act upon this, the more the other situations are actually relived in the exact same way. If you have a propensity to thinking that something's negative, then you're always gonna come back to this negative feeling. So how do we break this tie, right? That's the important question. The first thing is to take it in steps. So once I realize that there's this negative thing happening, and I'm always reacting in this way, I first have to have the realization that every time that this neurotransmitter fires and every time I have this negative action, I'm strengthening the tie. So you just break that tie. Maybe it's another negative. Maybe it's something positive. It's just taking the first step. And if 100 times you go back and you strengthen this tie, if just one time you're starting another tie, you're strengthening another tie, then that can certainly help you to break the pattern that you've constantly been in. This is the first step to change. Now from there, once you've broken one tie, it becomes easier and easier to break other ties. Now this is what behavioral therapists are usually trying to get at. This is almost one of the main fundamentals of behavioral therapy. So this is whenever we go to a therapist, this is what they're trying to get us to change, this behavior. Now that means that the outward behavior influences our chemicals, which influence our cells, which influence our behavior again. It's this circular. So I feel in retrospect, the negative times of my life, the times when I wasn't able to see things clearly, I'm literally reliving that. I always relive the exact same moment over and over and over. And by breaking the tie once, you're able to enjoy more of what life has to offer.